From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Trade tensions continue at the United Nations. Meanwhile, harvest rolls on.
USDA increased its average projected yield for both crops in Indiana, but what do farmers see in the fields? We have an update during our first AgDay harvest tour.
In agribusiness, breaking down beef demand.
Demand has done a phenomenal job. It's been amazing.
And servicing the branches of our military by caring for their trees.
AgDay, brought to you by the Chevy Silverado, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. President Trump taking aim at China over trade Tuesday at the United Nations. The president addressing the annual U.S. General Assembly. Trump saying China's admission into the World Trade Organization has greatly hurt the United States. He says while the U.S. and many other nations play by the rules, China uses government-run industrial planning and state-owned enterprises to rig the system.
They engage in relentless product dumping, forced technology transfer, and the theft of intellectual property. The United States lost over 3 million manufacturing jobs, nearly a quarter of all steel jobs, and 60,000 factories after China joined the WTO.
Meanwhile, Chinese soybean buyers may be circumventing soybean tariffs through a third party, Argentina. According to published reports, Argentina is buying U.S. soybeans for their domestic market and then exporting its own soybeans to China. However, Argentina struggled with drought this year, leaving their grain stocks in short supply.
The issue here is that Argentina doesn't have the beans. They had a short crop this year. They're big crushers. They typically don't export beans this time of year. It looks as if they're going to get the beans from the United States. They've booked 850,000 metric tons of beans since September 1st. Vaclavic says Argentina didn't sell any beans to China from September to February last year, but this year it looks to ship 1.8 million metric tons during that same period. Now, Vaclavic says even if the U.S. beans are not sold directly to China, the export market is still helping prices. Meanwhile, the president notching a trade victory on Monday as the U.S. and South Korea sign a renegotiated free trade agreement, and it could mean more exports of U.S. ag products. President Trump saying the new agreement makes significant improvements to reduce the trade deficit between the countries and create new opportunities to export American products to South Korea. He says U.S. autos, pharmaceuticals, and agricultural products will gain better access to Korean markets. The U.S. Meat Export Federation saying under the new deal, most U.S. pork products will enter Korea duty-free. And the duty rate for beef has been reduced from 40% to 21%. The beef tariff will eventually be eliminated. USMEF saying U.S. red meat exports to Korea set a record last year of $1.7 billion, up 19% year over year. To export a crop, first, you need to get it out of the field. And USDA says harvest is moving along in the Midwest. The latest crop progress report showing 16% of the nation's corn crop has been harvested. That's 5 points better than the 5-year average. North Carolina leading the nation with 3/4 now in the bin as farmers race to beat Hurricane Florence. Illinois corn, they're about 1/3 harvested. Iowa is just getting started after just 3 days last week that were suitable for field work. Now on soybeans, 14% of the oil seeds are now out of the field nationwide. The 5-year average is 8%. Southern growers lead the way, while North Dakota growers are about 1/5 of the way done.
The I-80 Harvest Tour is brought to you by the Enlist Weed Control System. More weed control, less drift and volatility, maximum yield potential.
In its latest crop progress report, USDA says 18% of Indiana corn has been harvested. That's 8 points ahead of the 5-year average. 13% of soybeans are cut, also running ahead of normal. Betsy Gibbon checks in on harvest in the Hoosier State for our first I-80 report of the season.
Travel through Indiana and there will be fields of golden brown.
This year, heck, everything's nice moisture, so we're running.
The sights and sounds of an early harvest.
The fall's been great here in September, getting everything dried down for us.
Yet there are also fields just starting to turn.
We kind of got a late start, started about May 5th planting, and didn't get done till about June 5th on corn and just a little bit later on soybeans.
The spring started off cool and wet for these two farmers. Wapple seeing major flooding on some of his fields, some now with grain yielding surprisingly well.
And actually, we've noticed less disease pressure in the soybeans. So I wonder, if that's something to do with the flooding, kind of knocking back disease pressure in those fields.
The spring turning out decent until a lack of rain later in the growing season.
Everything looked awesome June 15th, and then it basically didn't rain from then on. I had one farm where I ran the pivots for 64 straight days. That's a new record for me.
Yet Peterson's saying the heat brought increasing growing degree units, just what he needed to help mature late planted crops.
A lot of farmers in this area planted late, but it seems like there was not a lack of growing degree units. Do you think that's helped mature the crop?
Oh, I would say by far. I think we're a couple weeks ahead on the growing degree day units, and it let the crop speed up and get mature faster.
USDA says in its September crop production report, the average forecasted corn yield for the state could reach 192 bushels per acre and 60 bushels per acre for soybeans. Both estimates are higher than the projected national average and an increase from the August report.
You don't have to go very many miles away where they might have got that rain, and those crops might look pretty good.
A good crop is what Wapple is seeing, especially as he moves away from some of his sandier ground.
We had plenty of sunlight and heat for the corn. As long as we were able to give it water, it's turning out really good so far.
While some farmers may not know the yield just yet.
So it's got a little ways to go yet before it gets dry enough to harvest.
Others are figuring out their yields and returns.
Once we get in the muck areas, the muck patches, and under the water, then it's better than expected, which is helping.
Reporting for AgDay, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
Cindy Clausen with the AgDay weather team continues our look at harvest around farm country. She has today's crop comments. Good morning, Cindy.
Good morning, Clinton. Let's start with this great harvest photo from Marie Hill Flood. She shared it with us on Facebook. Marie says she took this picture one evening as the sun was going down in Cumberland County, Illinois, as she was waiting for her husband to dump beans. USDA says 75% of soybeans are harvested in the state. Normally, they're only about half done by now. Scott Matthews posted this picture of his rain gauge on Twitter. He's a rice and soybean farmer in northeastern Arkansas. They saw more than 5.5 inches over the past few days. He says he's going to need a bigger gauge. Well, the latest crop progress report shows harvest is already behind in the state, with soybean harvest trailing 9 points behind average. Rice harvest, however, is moving right along. 70% of that crop is cut. Let's take a look at the winds as we head through the next 24 to 36 hours, and it's mainly going to be out in the plains. Northeast will see some fairly breezy conditions, but especially over towards Texas, northern plains into Montana, into the Intermountain West there. Things kind of calm down a little bit as we get into the overnight hours, kind of seeing some stronger winds heading over towards the Great Lakes area, and you can see another front that's going to come through, and that will increase the winds as we get into Thursday afternoon in parts of the Corn Belt and in parts of the Intermountain West. We'll have your national forecast coming up in just a few minutes, but for now, here are some hometown temps.
Your next piece of equipment is on MachineryPete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on MachineryPete.com.
All right, when we come back, we'll look at beef demand and global export expectations. Plus, arborists salute our veterans by putting their tree skills to good use in our national cemetery. In agribusiness, soybeans and cotton seeing strength following the latest crop progress numbers. Let's get details now from the CME in Chicago.
We started off with a bang. Soybeans at one point up over 16 cents. Soybean meal up almost $9 at one point. That pulled corn positive on the day for a little while and really tried to get wheat to come up with it. That was coming from, again, the strength in the soybeans was coming from talk that Argentina and Brazil are going to continue to arbitrage, meaning buy U.S. soybeans and then turn around and sell them to China. And the idea that prices are getting pretty expensive, especially for soybean meal down in South America right now, as they kind of run out of their last crop. and start getting ready to plant this new crop. I think there's a chance or an opportunity for grains and soybeans in particular to bounce between now and the end of the calendar year as we stay optimistic that either this arbitrage will go on or our export sales directly to China will start to kick in. But if we don't have a deal in place by the first of the year and we're not seeing exports being really rather strong, things could get really ugly as we get into January and February as that South American crop starts to come online and that window of opportunity for our exports slams shut. This is Ted Seifert from Zaner Ag Hedge.
With so much turbulence in global trade markets, the beef industry worries about demand. So how are things going so far? Ten Morgan asks a question in today's analysis from the road.
Here now with Don Close of Rabo AgriFinance. Don, let's look at this cattle market now. When you look at packing capacity, how do we set today?
It's tight,
okay,
and it's going to continue to be tight. Certainly, we're much tighter on availability of rail space on the non-fed slaughter side than we are on the fed beef side. Well, and if we were to get into a forced liquidation situation with the dry weather through the Southwest, that could cause some problems.
But at this point, do you think we will see that forced liquidation happen?
I think certainly we've got anecdotal evidence that I know some of the Texas clients that I work with.
Yeah.
In isolated areas, I believe we are seeing some liquidation.
Okay.
At the same time, if I look at cows as a percent of total slaughter, if I look at heifers as a percent of fed slaughter, all those metrics have to think we're still in an expansionary phase. It's just we're right at the top of that crest, and it's very, very slow.
Well, looking at that expansionary phase at the same time, how has domestic demand been? As we've seen supplies grow, has demand been able to keep up this year?
Demand has done a phenomenal job. It's been amazing. And it's not only amazing on demand for total proteins and beef specifically, but the craze that we're seeing on high-end middle meats, we're seeing that demand on the items that make the biggest contribution to cutout. So it's been really cool.
But we've seen really good demand last year. So does that demand surprise you, Don? And do you think we're going to see a plateau when it comes to domestic demand?
I think it'll level off. I do have, if you look at the yield curve and the association with a flattening or inverted yield curve and the risk that has of leading to a recession, I think the economy is probably as good as it's going to get or very close to it. So I think we have to be a little bit cautionary going forward. But the whole change in consumer behavior, we're seeing a transition back to more meals eaten at home, and then protein of any kind is the craze right now. So it's been good.
All right, a good story. Don Close, thank you so much. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll have much more right here on Ag Day.
Welcome back to Ag Day. Taking a look at the root zone moisture map with Cindy Clausen. Cindy, as we look at this, you can see where we've had those big rain events over the last week or two.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You can see that in parts of the upper Midwest and heading up into the northern plains, Montana, also areas in Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, all the way up into the mid-Atlantic. You've got a little bit of Florence in there as well. So obviously some very, very heavy rains. Let's take a look at what we can expect as we head through the day today. And we're going to have a couple of fronts that will be affecting us over the next couple of days. One, you can see that's going to be heading into the eastern part of the country, the tail end of that right here through the southern plains. So look for some showers and thunderstorms all along this front as that marches to the east. High pressure behind it will leave some dry weather for a couple of days in much of the Corn Belt. But we are going to watch another system approaching the U.S.-Canadian border, and that will start to impact parts of the upper Midwest and northern plains. Here's this evening, and we're going to see that front then moving towards the east coast. Here comes that secondary low into the Great Lakes. But notice how dry we are expecting it to be in much of the plain states, at least before that secondary front comes through. And as we head through the day on Thursday, we're going to see wet conditions in the southeastern United States, and you can see that slow movement of the front in the north central United States. Very dry conditions as we get out in much of the four corners Corners region. All right, as we take a look at our precipitation estimate, this is the past 24 hours, so you can see that eastern front really dumping some rain, especially in parts of southern Illinois into much of Indiana and northwestern Ohio. Adding on the next 24 hours, we'll see that really being the focus for the precipitation. Look how it really affects the eastern half of the country, while much of the western part of the country remains on the dry side. Temperature-wise, one thing I really wanted to point out, look at the difference. Amarillo, high of 57 today, but still 91 in Brownsville. That front has some much cooler air behind it, so we see the warm and muggy conditions, but we'll see more fall-like conditions on the back side of that front. Heading into the overnight hours, we'll see those temperatures getting down into the 40s and 50s on the back side of that front, even some lower 60s in northern Texas. Look at that 46 in Amarillo. But as we head into the day tomorrow, things even out a little bit more. It's going to be definitely cooler for a lot of folks, even stretching on into the east with highs just in the 60s. The real warm weather remains in the southeast, far southeast, and far southwest. The jet stream shows that we continue to see a trough here in the nation's midsection. A little bit warm to start off in the east and into the west, but we're going to notice it starts to kind of flatten out a little bit as we get into the week. Notice how we get a little bit more of a zonal flow as we get into the late weekend, but then a big trough starts to dig into the west. That's going to mean a much cooler start to the week next week as we start to see those temperatures warming up in the eastern part of the country. That's a look at your national forecast. Now let's check on the weather where you live. Marbleton, Wyoming, lots of sun for you today and warmer this afternoon. High of 67, but chilly again tonight. Granite City, Illinois, mostly sunny. We'll see a high of around 71 degrees. And Limestone, Pennsylvania, look for showers and thunderstorms with a high of 69.
One of the world's largest grocers is taking traceability to a new level. Details next on the Packer TV. And later, these volunteers are honoring our heroes with service and caring of their trees. That story on In the Country. In news from our partners at the Packer, Walmart will start requiring its direct suppliers to use blockchain technology to improve traceability of products back to the farm. Now, starting next fall, Walmart and its Sam Club division will require those suppliers of fresh, leafy greens to implement real-time end-to-end traceability of products using a digital ledger developed by IBM. Walmart will expand to other fresh fruit and produce as well. The giant retailer is saying that the goal is to speed up response times in case of foodborne illnesses and recalls. And the California Table Grape Commission is rolling out a new health advertising campaign. The messaging focusing on studies that show eating normal amounts of grapes each day may help with long-term health. Now, according to the commission, grapes contain more than 1,600 documented natural plant compounds, antioxidants, and other polyphenols. All right, when we come back, serving the branches of our military by caring for the branches of these trees. I'll explain next.
In the Country, brought to you by Kubota's M7060, built to get the job done. See KubotaUSA.com or your local Kubota dealer for more information.
Arborists across the country participated in a day of service at National Veteran Cemeteries. It was their way of saying thank you to veterans by helping make cemeteries safer and more beautiful. LSU Ag Center's Craig Gautreaux has more from Port Hudson, Louisiana.
It's called Saluting Branches, Arborists United for Veterans Remembrance. On this day, tree care professionals in 34 states expressed gratitude to veterans by dedicating an entire day of service to help make national cemeteries safer for visitors.
This is the height of their season. This is when they're making their money for the year. And they stopped work to come here and do this as a volunteer basis to help our national cemeteries honor our veterans.
One of the duties of the national cemeteries is to be a place of reverence. Maintaining the grounds is a major task, and tree maintenance is very costly. The volunteers were providing an essential service that would have been difficult otherwise.
Normally it would take us a lot of time going through our normal process to get it done. And being able to pull a group like this together would be almost impossible.
At the Port Hudson National Cemetery, volunteers had a full day's work in front of them.
Primarily, we're going to be doing a couple of removals of trees that are hazardous, and we will also be doing some lifting of canopies so that vehicles can pass under without damaging the vehicles or the trees.
Maintenance for large trees requires specialized equipment and expert operators. With a heat index above 100, these trained volunteers were showing their appreciation for America's veterans.
Sometimes it's put on the back burner in favor of other necessary work, and so this is our way as tree care professionals to come together and honor the veterans who've gone before us.
In Louisiana, volunteers were also donating their time at the Alexandria National Cemetery in Pineville. With the LSU Ag Center, this is Craig Gautreaux reporting.
All right, thanks, Craig. Since 2015, Saluting Branches volunteers have donated more than 34,000 hours of tree care services, or more than $3.4 million in donations. That's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. It's been part of your day with us. For all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.